Hey, how y'all doing? This is Mongo Slade, and today we're going to talk about CM Punk going on Renee Young's podcast. Now, I only watched two videos, so I didn't listen to the whole thing. I have no interest in Renee Young's podcast. No diss to Renee Young. I just don't care. Also, have no interest in listening to CM Punk. But let's be honest. If you're a CM Punk fan, you're probably not about to like my commentary on this thing. Again, I only listened to two segments, so I don't know. But I listened to two segments that I thought were very important for my channel. One is about what would it take for get him to wrestle again, and two was his talk about unions. But that's actually a little bit more nuanced because he also talked about the third party affiliations. And I do want to talk about that too, because that's actually where him and Renee actually kind of struck my attention because I thought that was pretty interesting. So I'm going to give them good marks there. But we're going to let's talk about what it would take to get him to wrestle. His first thing he says the stupidest amount of money, or just an interesting scenario, a fun story that will be easier for him to get into, something for him to sink his teeth into. He says he's like an actor who has played every type of role, and there's more interesting people for him to wrestle in AEW because he's never wrestled them before, and he's wrestled everybody in WWE, or everybody that would be interesting to wrestle. He's already wrestled them in WWE. And he's also said that there's baggage and all types of things that they need to be worked out, which I'm guessing is like the office and all that type of stuff. And he said that Renee Young asked him about Joe, and I thought at first she was talking about Roman Reigns, but she was talking about Samoa Joe. And he says that that would be interesting for him, but is it just going to be just a wrestling match? So here I kind of thought, like, if it was Samoa Joe's retirement match, he'd probably do it. But if it's just a feud between the two of them, he probably wouldn't be interested. So I'm like, okay, they have history, so there's something you could build off there as far as the interest is. So he says that Roman is doing good, but it will be interesting to wrestle him. But he was more interested in wrestling, if they're going to do like women. Like he really said, like, oh, I'll wrestle Asuka or I'll wrestle Pam. Pam is Bailey, I believe. So it was like that was weird. But he also was Renee asked him about New Japan. He said he hasn't watched a lot of New Japan. But his experience with New Japan was that he was told that he was too small to be a heavyweight, but too big to be a cruiserweight. Which sounds about right. If he was in Japan before 2005 when he showed up in WWE, that's about right. He was that. Yeah, that's about fair. So let's talk about that before we get into the whole union thing. The idea of CM Punk wrestling again is interesting as far as I was kind of a fan of him when he was wrestling. But I think the longer he's been out, the less I've liked him. Because the more he talks, the more I dislike him. That's kind of how I feel about CM Punk now. The more I see him tweet, the more I see him do interviews, the more I just think like this dude is a miserable, bitter, childless weirdo. And it's just unfortunate. Like, I don't know what's up with these guys shacking up with these broads and they not having kids. Like, he's been married to AJ Lee for like 10 years, and it's like, he's singing songs to his dog. He's like, wow, get a kid, man. Go do something constructive with your life. But, I'm not, he kind of playfully threw out $100 million. For starters, he's not worth $100 million. We already know that. He's not worth 10 million. If we're being honest, he's not worth 5. If you're going to, let's play devil advocate and say you're going to sign CM Punk to some money. What would be I think a fair offer would be the equivalent of whatever you're paying John Moxley. That's what I would believe. If you're going to pay John Moxley, let's say 1.6 million dollars, I think that would be fair for CM Punk. Now, people say, no, CM Punk is a bigger star than Moxley. It's like, yeah, but he's also got he's also older. He's got his ass kicked in the UFC. He's not going to do that much. He's not wrestling all the time. So you're going to pay him the exact same amount of money. But Moxley is going to wrestle more and probably more often than CM Punk would be. You're just going to have him under contract, to have a match every once in a while. He's not going to come back and do a full schedule. I mean, that's pretty much that's out of the question. It's not going to happen. So I would offer him the exact same amount of money. I mean, and I would do it from AEW. I wouldn't do it from WWE at all because he's he's got a lot of heat with those guys, not just with Triple H, but also with AJ Styles and other people in WWE. And what we talk about as far as when we get to the unions, we're also going to mention that thing too. But you know, I've never been a guy who thought that CM Punk walked on the moon. You know, I thought that he was a good wrestler, good promo, you know, good personality, had great intensity, could work, you know, was a little clunky athletically, but unorthodox athletically, but it was cool. You know, he was a cool guy in the right place at the right time. He was anti-authority in the right place at the right time, and it's set perfectly against John Cena. You know, which is why that was the height of CM Punk's relevance, is when he was fighting John Cena, because it was the perfect. It was Batman and the Joker. You know, it was like you had this guy who is the establishment versus the guy who is anti-establishment, and it was perfect, a perfect story, and it fit perfectly. But you can't tell me that CM Punk actually, you know, was able to exceed that point. Like, that was a good spot for Cena, but Cena has done bigger things than that. You know, like, that's how you know Cena is a huge star, where the thing that CM Punk is most known for will probably be in the top 7 for Cena. Like, Cena going to a one night stand and, you know, getting harassed by that audience is a bigger deal than him going to Chicago, you know. And, you know, you would think it would be similar, but no, you know, him going to Philly was the setup for him going to Chicago, because we already knew that he could handle it once he went to Chicago, you know, CM Punk's home ground, and, you know, got booed out of the building and everybody loved CM Punk, but he had already been through that. This was new for Punk. It was new for Cena. So, you know, I'm not one of those people that think that CM Punk, you know, I do think that he probably wasn't used to the best of his ability, but you had this guy who, he got to wrestle The Rock, he got to wrestle Undertaker at WrestleMania, he got, you know, over a year-long title run. I do believe when he says that he's wrestled everybody he wants to wrestle, that there's nobody new that he would wrestle. I don't believe that, because I do believe, well, I think he probably wrestled some of the guys that are in NXT right now. You know, the Tommaso Ciampas, because Tommaso Ciampa was from Ring of Honor. I believe Adam Cole was also in Ring of Honor. So maybe they've had matches before. Maybe. I don't know how old those guys are, or if they were around at the time. Matter of fact, I don't think that they would have been around at the time. I don't think Adam Cole is old enough to have wrestled CM Punk. Maybe it is. I would have to look that up, and I don't, you know, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna hold you up. I'm not gonna do it. But you know, Tommaso Ciampas, the Roderick Strongs, all those guys. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure CM Punk was like around that age group. Maybe he did wrestle them, but it wasn't like a big main event or anything like that. But you also got guys like Karrion Kross. I don't think he's wrestled that guy before. You know, I don't know if he's wrestled Keith Lee before, but you know, it was just kind of a thing where he didn't completely shoot it from orbit and say never, but he basically said it'll cost you a lot of money. And he's only saying that because he knows these companies have a lot of money to offer him. So, you know, that was him wrestling again. It's intriguing on a part-time basis. If you was to get him for one big match or 2 or 3 big matches, that would be great. But if you're going to bring him back for like a recurring role, that would get stale really quickly. And I think that he's one of these guys that people think is a bigger star than he really is. Even the video that talks about this is 3 days old and it's got 15,000 views. You know, the video of him, this is from Renee podcast, and it's from her YouTube channel. It's like, I remember CM Punk being not that big of a draw. You know, I remember it clearly because I was a fan of CM Punk, and I was arguing with people like, TV ratings don't matter. TV ratings don't matter. And people was talking about like, oh, they put him on the cover of the video game, and the video game had less buys than the previous year. And I was like, could that have something to do with the game? It was like, we'll talk about all this type of stuff later. But I remember when he was initially made champion, there was a lot of people talking about how the ratings were slipping, you know, ratings were down, and, you know, pay-per-view buys were down and all this type of stuff. And, you know, then of course they blamed it on, oh, they had him, it's because he lost to Triple H. It was like, come on. You really think that is? So when ratings were going down, like when John Cena is at the top, are we going to be like, oh, it's because he lost to Kevin Federline? No, nobody thinks that. That's ridiculous. You know, that's absolutely ridiculous. So that's stupid. Like trying to blame it on like one particular match or situation is very rare. Now, maybe a continuance of situations where, the guy basically is just getting beaten down, maybe. But, he had that one match with Triple H, which he lost, and then he won the title, I think, the next month or something like that. So that wasn't really I don't see how it could have been that damaging. And if your push is that fragile, I don't really see how, it didn't stop Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan, he won the title. They took the title away from him immediately. Didn't harm his push at all. He was still over. He's still selling T-shirts. So it was Steve Austin, same thing. Stone Cold Steve Austin. They didn't jump on the Austin 316 bandwagon immediately. He wasn't even on the SummerSlam card. And it was so he won the King of the Ring in June. He really didn't start. His push did not begin until November. Like he was on TV and stuff like that. But if you look at the pay-per-views and stuff like that, the next big match after he won the King of the Ring was against Bret Hart at Survivor Series. So he went months and months and months without big matches, without big angles, without any major development or next push. It didn't stop him. So we kind of have to use these things a little bit more logically. So now let's get into this union stuff. So if you're not interested in the whole politics conversation, you can stop here. So let's talk about the union thing and the third party affiliations. So when he was talked about the unions, he says that both UFC and WWE are right-wing weirdos because they vote for what's good for their pocketbook. So here's a guy who, this is why I mentioned earlier that he was a bitter, miserable, childless weirdo. It's just him and his wife. He doesn't have to take care of anybody. Dana White has 100 fighters, 200 fighters on his roster. Vince McMahon has how many wrestlers on the roster? 200, 300. And then you count all the little people in the offices, all the camera guys, all of the commentators and the writers. And UFC has, all kinds of stuff. You have the staff that takes care of the websites. All of these people are relying on Dana White and Vince McMahon. Okay? If something goes wrong with the pocketbook, who is affected? Not Dana White or Vince McMahon, because they're multimillionaires, billionaires. We're going to raise your taxes. It's like, okay, great. But what about all these people I have to let go if you raise the taxes on the company? What about all of these guys? This is what people don't think about. It is not all they doing is protecting their own money. It's like, look at all the people that dangle from the strings that these people have. How many people are you taking care of versus how many people they have to take care of? All these people rely on Dana White and the UFC to make money. All these people rely on Vince McMahon and the WWE to make money. If they fail to make money, people will be let go. If you increase their taxes and they have to take money from them, people will lose their jobs. It is inevitable. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You can't just say, we're going to take more money and then expect them to just be like, okay, we're just going to keep shoveling more money out. The point of being a millionaire or a billionaire or running a business is money in, not money out. Once you start increasing the money out, you have to now increase the money in. If you can't do that, then you have to cut the amount of money that you're sending out, and money towards employees or contractors is money out. This is common fucking sense for anybody who knows anything about a basic fucking business. This is why it's important when you realize what these people are saying that they're not thinking. They're not thinking. Unions are the fucking devil, okay? And I'll say it like, and I know that a lot of people are like, man, it's not that bad. It's like, no. You literally have to look at how unions have destroyed whole cities. Whole cities. Detroit, Gary, Indiana. Just look at these big unionized cities, and then the moment that these companies saw an opportunity to stop the fucking bleeding, because you have all these people who decide, okay, we're not going to arbitrarily keep jacking up the cost of labor. We're going to go somewhere, and they'll of course wrap it in some, they're trying to get cheap Chinese or cheap Mexican labor. It's like, yeah, they do. Because when you look at what these people are actually doing in these shops, and I worked in a plant. I have lived experience in a plant. Most monkeys can do that shit. Okay, you're sitting there literally drilling a hole or something all day. Okay, it's not a $20 an hour job. You know, $20 an hour or something like that. You should have to apply some type of complex or creative system going on here. You know, but if you want to be like, well, me showing up should just be worth X amount of dollars, and somebody was like, no, and then you're not allowed to compete with other people. Like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, man. So that's just one thing. So then he talks about Dana White, you know, being more generous than Vince McMahon. That Dana White, you know, has slid guys' money under the table. So when guys come out and say they're not paid enough, then, you know, he knows that Dana White probably just gave this guy some money. And so that's why Dana would be, you know, upset about when people come out and talk about pay. And he says that, you know, even then fighters should unionize anyway. And then he says, just like the wrestlers. And then Renee asked him about the wrestlers, and he said, it'll never happen because there's no such thing as the boys. You know, when you leave the bubble, the wrestling bubble, you never hear from them. And I stopped the video right there. And I said, this is the same CM Punk who, when he was asked by Chris Jericho to come on his podcast, he told Jericho no, right? He basically said that Jericho was trying to take advantage of him. This is the same CM Punk who got sued by Colt Cabana, right? His best friend, right? This is the same CM Punk who has gone on and burned so many bridges of people that he knew in the wrestling business. I think the only one that he might still have is Paul Heyman. But he's burned a lot of those bridges. That's why you don't hear from them. Okay? You don't hear from them because you basically said that Jericho was a stooge. And, you know, this was before Jericho left, of course. You basically said Jericho was a stooge. He was trying to use his name to boost his podcast. He jammed up Colt Cabana. He's pretty much downplayed and shit on. He said some real crazy shit about AJ Styles being, you know, a racist or something like that. Or it's ridiculous. That's why people don't fuck with you. You don't hear from them because you're a miserable piece of shit. That's why they don't talk to you. It had nothing to do with there's no such thing as the boys. Well, maybe. I don't know. But I know in your specific incidents, in your specific situation, you've had very public breakdowns, very public arguments with people who were your best friends, people who were supporters of yours. You can't just be like, well, everybody's out to cut each other's throats when people were willing to be friends with you and you shit on them. It's like, get the fuck out of here. So then he starts talking about some guys are bootlickers. You know, some people are just natural bootlickers. And, you know, you're supposed to just lick the boot. You're not supposed to eat the whole thing. And I was just kind of like, what? You know, how is looking out for yourself being a bootlicker? That's what I want to know. It's a weird reforming of concepts that you get when you listen to certain people talk. It's like, you don't want to tether your income to someone else's income. You don't want other people riding your coattails to a better life. I mean, they're already doing that if you're a top guy already, right? And you worked hard to get to that point. You're working hard to stay there. Now you just got some random guy who says, I should get paid the same amount of money. I should have the same opportunities as you. I'm going to tether myself. I'm going to handcuff myself to you. So you can't go any further without dragging me up too. It's like, no. Again, you have to realize that people are in this thing for themselves, you know, and that there's nothing wrong with that. These people have children. They have, you know, lives that they're trying to lead. If it doesn't benefit them, they're not going to go for it. And that's really how life should go. If you go towards things that benefit you, even, you know, and not exactly harming, and which is kind of how he framed it, that, you know, they'll undercut everyone else. It's like, how are you undercutting everyone else? What you're going to do is undercut the top guys, because now you're going to say, well, we have to increase everybody's pay or whatever. So we can't offer the top guys as much money because, you know, money is limited. So we can't just say, here's X amount of trillions of dollars or whatever, because we got so much money to pay Apollo Crews and Kalisto and all these guys. It's like, no, that's not how this works. That's not how this works. Again, unions that's really what makes unions the devil, though, is that it really teaches you that it is us versus them with your employer, that you are in some type of antagonistic relationship when instead of a symbiotic relationship. This is why people are always so surprised when unions just get in bed with corporations. They're like, oh, the unions don't do what they're supposed to do anyway. They just get in bed with corporations. It's like they can't exist without them. So yeah, they're in bed with them. They can't exist without them. So of course, when you see the UAW and Chrysler or UAW and GM or getting together to screw the workers, it's like, of course they are. The fucking UAW cannot exist without the worker and without GM. What the hell are they going to do? They don't hire people. They don't train anybody. So like, what? They're the middleman. They need you. And you need the employer. It might be better for you to cut out the middleman, which would be the union, and go directly to your employer. These guys do it for a long time. CM Punk mentioned that he took a pay cut to go to developmental. He said he was making a lot more money on the independents. And I believe it. I do believe it because CM Punk was hot at the time. How do you justify wanting to support a union when you have lived through the idea of, I can make a lot more money just going from show to show, doing my own thing, setting up my own bookings without a union. And I was making a lot more money. Jesus H. Christ. Come on, man. So he talked about the third party affiliations. And he says that he's always had a problem with this because he talked about Xavier Woods getting a job at G4 and wondering if WWE is getting paid for that and why Xavier Woods can do the G4 thing, but Zelina Vega wasn't able to do her thing. And then he basically talked about, and Renee talked about this too, that it's very difficult that WWE promotes who they want to promote. That, he tells this anecdote about wanting to be on the pinball machine. Like, meeting some guy who, wanted him to be on the cover of their WWE or wrestling based pinball machine. And it was pitched to WWE and they gave the guy John Cena or something like that. And, or it never got to him, or they gave him a list of names that people that they wanted to promote. And, Renee said the same thing that, somebody pitched an idea for a cooking show and knew that Renee was writing a cookbook, and it was pitched to WWE. And WWE gave the job to Bo Dallas. And, she said that there were other things that she wanted to have a podcast and WWE didn't want her to have a podcast. They didn't want to promote the podcast and stuff like that. And and this is where I said they have a good point, because you having to go through WWE to do this stuff. That is completely different. Now I have to break it down. I have to separate these things. If you want to do something wrestling related, let's put it like that, having to go through WWE, it is some bullshit, okay? Because they do pick certain people that they want to promote. There have been numerous stories of people who said, oh, I thought I was going to be in this movie. It goes through WWE. Next thing you know, John Cena's doing it. Next thing you know, Randy Orton's doing it. Next thing you know, somebody else is doing it. This has happened numerous times. And I hate it every time I hear it, because I don't understand why they would pick and choose certain people. But what I'm guessing is it probably might have something to do with drawing power. It might have something to do with the corporate image and those sorts of things, which is bullshit politics. Okay, it's bullshit politics. It has nothing to do with the performer. And I know that CM Punk personally had a problem with Brock Lesnar being able to be sponsored by Jimmy John's, and he had a sponsorship set up and the WWE nixed it. And I think that's some bullshit too, because I don't believe Jimmy John's was and I remember when I talked about these things before, these third party things, I always look at whether they're in competition with something else, right? So is Brock Lesnar's Jimmy John's sponsorship in competition with another sandwich based like Subway or something like that sponsors WWE? I don't know. And apparently Brock just has the stroke that he's able to do that. And I don't believe in treating everyone the same, but I do believe that people should have the same opportunities. So I do believe that people should be able to get their own personal sponsorships as long as it doesn't conflict with the overall sponsorships of WWE, or that the sponsor is not something that is detrimental to WWE's brand. So this is where you get kind of like the OnlyFans and something like that, where OnlyFans is like 99% porn. Even if Zelina Vega is not doing porn, it's associated with porn, you know, and there's no exception, there's no escape for that. So I agree with them on the third party platforms of how, you know, they need to do something about that system of somebody pitching an idea for Renee and it not getting to Renee. At least let her make the decision instead of the company saying, well, we don't want it for Renee, we want it for Bo Dallas. Like, what the fuck? Why? You know, like, that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense. Now, I'm guessing that the whole WWE pushing podcasts on the people, they have Swerve's podcast and New Day's podcast, and there's some other podcasts that are popping up. I'm guessing the whole Renee podcast thing probably didn't come up until they had decided to shut all that stuff down. You know, that's like, it is weird that certain people, now you would think, look at Lillian Garcia wasn't even working there, and they brought her podcast to the network. And you know, she wasn't even working there at the time. And Swerve is a low man on the totem pole in NXT. His podcast is on the network. You would think they would let Renee Young do the podcast. And then they also did petty stuff like bringing back Talking Smack after Renee Young left. You know, so they have done things that, you know, WWE is not perfect. And so a lot of people are like, oh, you just a WWE apologist. It's like, no, I just look at situations and say, this is stupid. This is stupid. This is stupid. This is not that bad. You know, so the third party sponsorships and stuff like that is pretty bad. Now, CM Punk said the video game that THQ or whoever was making the video game, I don't know who it was, wanted him to be on the cover of the video game. WWE rejected CM Punk and said, we want Sheamus, The Miz, or John Cena. And he said that THQ really, really pushed to put him on the game. And I do remember that the game, it didn't flop, but it didn't do as well as the previous year because CM Punk was on the cover. And, you know, eventually WWE just kind of like, okay, whatever, you know, but you have to ask the question, is that some type of internal thing that he doesn't know about that, you know, the company does, that certain people's image draws more interest. They are bigger stars. They get, you know, like, you have people now, because of Meltzer and all these guys, right, that they are breaking down quarter hours. Like, I remember when, this was actually very recent, Kenny Omega put out a tweet saying, why can't your favorite wrestler move the needle or something like that? And then there was people in the comment sections like reaming him about how his quarter hours were getting beaten by Io Shirai on NXT. And they had like footage, like, you know, documents like of people like Meltzer and all them people trying to break down the quarter hours. And, you know, you have that too. Because you do have the analytics that the company has that the performer really doesn't have, you know, or they doesn't pay that much attention to. Is it that the company can look and say, okay, THQ wants CM Punk on the cover of this game, but The Miz is selling more t-shirts. Sheamus has better quarter hours. John Cena sells more t-shirts and draws more ratings. It would be better for one of them to be on this cover of this game, you know, because they actually sell. You know, they're looking at the how people are perceived, you know, from hard data, not just I listen to the fan reaction, but they're looking at hard data. And I don't know if The Miz ever sold more t-shirts than CM Punk. I don't know. I'm just giving an example. That if you look at this situation and you say, they want this guy to be in this movie, but the movie may make more money if a bigger star is in it. And that's another anecdote he gave, that somebody pitched an idea for a movie for a particular wrestler, but when the movie got to WWE, they put John Cena in it. And I said, okay, well, maybe that's the goal, that they would make more money if John Cena was in the movie, because they do get a cut of this stuff, you know, and it is what it is. And maybe that's what it is, that they help you make more money in this movie, therefore they get a bigger cut. That could be the case. And I think that is the case, because you have to look at it from a business perspective, not that they like and don't like people, but if they can increase your cut of how much you make from this movie or this video game, then their cut increases too. So they're looking at a way to make more money for themselves. Therefore, if the performer that you want to put on the cover of this magazine, this video game, this t-shirt or whatever, if that person is not going to make enough money to justify, the deal, then they're going to choose to put somebody else there. And I don't necessarily think that that's fair. I understand it, but I don't necessarily think that that's fair. But that's essentially all that I wanted to talk about. CM Punk, obviously, look, he burns me up, like, and it's just a really weird situation where I really like this guy, and then I started not liking him, and now it's kind of like, ugh. Whenever somebody talks about him, I'm just like, ugh. Like, we really think that CM Punk is like this huge superstar? We really believe that? Like, I remember people talking about TV. Now, in 2020, it would be different because CM Punk has not wrestled since 2014. He has not done anything physical in a couple of years. It would be a big boost for him to come back and wrestle the first couple of times he did it. So it would be huge if you can get CM Punk to do 1 match, 2 matches, 3 matches, right? Because people will be so interested in the curiosity of whether he still got it. Okay, that would be the first thing. People would be like, oh, CM Punk, that's awesome. Then it would be like, but does he still got it? Oh, he still got it? Okay, so now I want to see him do this. I want to see him do this. And then once he does that and he does that, it's going to be like, okay, now he can go away. That's just kind of how people think. Like, the surprise factor does not last that long. The curiosity factor does not last that long. There would definitely be surprise and curiosity if you bring CM Punk in. But how long will it last, and will he make that money back? Because it's an investment. Overall, does it justify paying him X amount of dollars if he doesn't draw? And then what? Like, what if you bring back this, you give him this hero's entrance, you give him all this money, he comes back to do this cool storyline, and then it doesn't draw? Then you're kind of screwed. You're in the TNA situation. But I do believe that he is far more interested in working in AEW than in WWE. I'm fine with that. I believe, and I'm going to say it right here, I believe AEW will get CM Punk, because eventually people are going to start, like, when the whole thing with Sting wears off, they're going to have to go somewhere else. They're going to have to go bigger. And they can't really get that much bigger than CM Punk unless they're going to go with, like Jim Cornette said, like The Rock. So that's it. I believe they will get him eventually, probably not within the next year or so, but they're going to be looking to do the CM Punk deal. It may be CM Punk Cody, not Jericho, but maybe CM Punk Cody or something like that, or CM Punk and Darby Allin or something something like that. And I believe it's going to happen. So I'm going to say it here first. You heard it here first. If you listen to the whole thing, I believe CM Punk will wrestle in AEW before AEW shuts down. And I think they'll be shutting down probably within the next 10 years. Probably not within the next 5, but within the next 10. Because they're just, I'm going off the subject. All right, let me talk to you. I'll talk to you guys later. Like this video, share this video. If you guys really should support the channel, because this type of wrestling content is different from the cookie cutter bullshit that you get from Cultaholic or What Culture Wrestling, which is completely, bullshit, and it lacks any sort of thought or any type of analysis. Support the analysis that I do here by sending at least $1 through Cash App. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you guys.